Welcome to Good Screenwriting. I'm Trevor Meyer, and today we're going to talk about Black Panther. This movie is the latest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which got a lot bigger recently due to the Sony deals and the Fox deals. I think there's going to be 6 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies coming out this year, including Venom and Deadpool and Dark Phoenix. We haven't decided yet how those X-Men films are going to be merged with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but just when you think the Marvel people are running out of ideas, they go and pull something like that and revitalize the franchise for the next decade. So, let's talk about this movie. I'm going to tell you where I position this as far as the quality of Marvel movies goes. I would put it somewhere between Thor and Doctor Strange in terms of quality and how much I enjoyed it. So, is it on the level of, say, Iron Man or the Avengers? In my opinion, no. It's a pretty standard Marvel origin movie, except it's not an origin movie, and neither was Thor, which kind of set a precedent, which is that this character already has powers, already has a life, already has a costume. And in a way, this is a movie about reclaiming that and really owning it in the way that Thor started out the movie already a superhero of sorts and lost his powers, got banished to Earth, and then came back and really understood what it meant to be a hero. This is very much the same thing. Black Panther already has a suit, he's already got powers, he's already living this lifestyle. But by the end, he realizes what it actually means to be a hero. So in that sense, it's an origin story for him. The other thing that's interesting about these Marvel Phase 3 that we're in now is that we're getting the very first spin-offs that we've ever seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Meaning, before they always started with these solo movies and then combined them into a team-up movie. And that was the way it always was. And until Spider-Man Homecoming, we never took a character from a team-up movie and then spun him off into a solo movie. But we've done that twice now, from Civil War into Spider-Man Homecoming and Black Panther. So, if I'm... this is going to be tough to not give away any spoilers, so I'm going to say that what I like about it is it's got a lot of unique texture. You can tell they did a lot of research. You can tell that they got really deep into African culture, and I know they had a consultant on board that gave them all of that information to make sure that the tribes were unique, that the rituals were somewhat based in reality, and they even cross over into America. And most of the movie, I think, takes place in Africa. Some of it takes place in Korea. And very little of it actually takes place in America. I think there's a part that takes place in London as well. Now, what I will say is it doesn't feel like a standard issue superhero movie because of all of those textural details. But the core underneath it, the skeleton behind it, is very much a standard issue superhero movie. And the only reason that I'm not going to give this a 5 out of 5 is because usually if I'm watching a movie and I'm really enjoying it, I'll hover around a 4 and I'm kind of, rating it as we go. And Spider-Man Homecoming, I was at a 4 for almost the entire movie. I'd be like up to a 4, and then up to a 5, back down to a 4, down to a 3, up to a 4. And I was kind of hovering around 4 for the whole movie. Now, every once in a while, something special will push it over the edge, and it doesn't mean it's perfect, but it'll get me to say, you know what? Yeah, this deserves a 5 out of 5. It's got that little X factor, it's got something special to it that really pushes me over the edge emotionally, or where I'm like, you know what, that was actually really great. And Spider-Man Homecoming, again, I'm going to try not to give anything away for that one. But I was at a 4 until the very last scene of the movie. And there's a certain line of dialogue that Aunt May speaks at the very end of the movie that pushed it up to a 5, and then they sealed the deal with their post-credit scene with Captain America. Those two things combined really cemented it at a 5 out of 5 for me. Now, Black Panther never did that, unfortunately. It had a lot of great stuff in it, and I really enjoyed it, but it never gave me that little X factor, that little push that got me all the way to a 5 out of 5. So as much as I enjoyed it, I liked it, I didn't love it. It was good, not great, for me. So I think that's all I can say without giving away any spoilers. So we're going to go into spoiler territory now. So bottom line, if you haven't seen the movie yet, I think it's worth watching. I think it's a good movie. I think it's an important movie. And we're going to get a little bit more into that with the spoiler section here. So bottom line, I say it's worth seeing. So go check it out. Now we're going into spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In a lot of ways, what I thought this was going to be almost is Thor set in Africa. And it is very much of a Hamlet type story where there's somebody who ascends to the throne. There's somebody who challenges the ascent to the throne. He gets dethroned, and then he comes back and he reclaims the throne. So there is a little bit of Thor Ragnarok in it with the ancestral plane where he gets to talk to his deceased father, who was the former king. So there's a lot of Thor stuff in this. They just move it from Asgard to Africa. That being said, like I was saying before, the amount of texture and detail that goes into all of that African culture, all the furniture, all the wallpaper, all the surface details are so incredibly different. You don't even realize what the underlying structure is, which is good. There's a part in Act 2 where I thought I understood where the movie was going, where it became a sort of James Bond type thing, where they finally get the mission. So they start out in Wakanda, they get the mission, and then all of a sudden they're in, I'm pretty sure this part was in Korea, where they're in a casino, and T'Challa is wearing a tuxedo. He's talking to his 2 female sidekicks with earpieces. They're meeting with Everett Ross, who is an American CIA agent, and they're trying to take down Ulysses Claw. And they're trying to take down Ulysses Claw, played by Andy Serkis, who has this robotic arm that can shoot lasers and stuff like that. So I thought, okay, now I get what this movie is. It's an African James Bond. He lives in Wakanda, he gets his mission, and then he travels to exotic locations and does cool stuff. And it's basically a James Bond movie. I get what this is now. He has Q, his sister is basically Q, who gives him all his gadgets and stuff like that at the beginning. So I thought I understood what this movie was, and I was really excited. I'm like, oh, it's a James Bond movie. I get that. And it really ends up not being that. That was just for one sequence. And then I think they go back to Wakanda, and it's very much about politics. It's very much focused on culture. And the structure behind it is not as organized as I was kind of hoping it would be. So, again, very enjoyable, and it's a great character study. It's a great topical movie, and it's got the basic hero's journey built into it. But it doesn't fit into any model for any kind of blockbuster movie that I typically enjoy. For example, I would say Iron Man has a very clean structure. It's very easy to pick that movie apart. And maybe I just need to see this one a few more times. But this one, it's pretty loose, and it's very much about the connections between these various characters. Now, what I really like, one of my favorite parts about it, is the main villain, and he goes by the moniker Killmonger, which sounds ridiculous. And I think there's a reason why they never actually called Jeff Bridges' character Ironmonger. They drop a little Easter egg in there where he says, "We're Ironmongers, this is what we do." But they never actually call him Ironmonger because it's a silly sounding name. And in this one, they actually have to call this character Eric, who, again, spoiler alert, is T'Challa's cousin. They have to actually call him Killmonger because I believe in the comics his name is actually Eric Killmonger. And they come up with a semi-realistic backstory for why he's called Killmonger. And I'd buy it, and it sounded less silly as the movie went on. But it very much had the vibe of like an Xbox Live username, Killmonger. I'm the Killmonger. So, but his backstory is really interesting because he is actually an American who grew up in Oakland, which really helps because I believe that's where the director and writer Ryan Coogler grew up. And it's where Fruitvale Station, one of his early movies, took place. And it's where Fruitvale Station, one of his early movies, took place, which also starred Michael B. Jordan. So there's a real sense of American culture built into it too, specifically African American culture. And the best stuff in it is the fact that we got this whole movie that's kind of separated from the world, and it's separate from America. It's Wakanda set in the continent of Africa, but Eric Killmonger comes in, and he's the son of a Wakandan. In fact, his father was King T'Chaka's brother, which is why he and Black Panther are cousins. So the prologue to the movie, as we come to find out its deeper meaning, is King T'Challa kills his own brother at the beginning of the movie. That brother has a son that they just abandon and leave alone without a father. And that really kind of hits home. And this movie does touch on some actually kind of uncomfortable political topics, more specifically than I thought it would. Because if people are thinking that this movie's political just because the cast is mostly African American and that half of the characters are female, as makes sense because of reality, if people think that's the reason why this movie's political, that's not it. They really dive into the politics of how African Americans are oppressed all around the world and specifically in America. And Eric Killmonger is very much of a Malcolm X type character, more specifically than I was expecting. And it can make people uncomfortable when you're watching a movie like this, that they get pretty real with it. It's not this fantasy world where you're fighting some fake. I mean, it is. There are these fantasy elements to it. But you go back to the very first Iron Man where Tony Stark comes back and he's saying, "I saw young Americans get killed by the very weapons I built to defend them and protect them. And I saw that I became a part of a system that is comfortable with zero accountability." That very much touched on real-life political issues at the time, and this movie does that, but is very specific to racial tension in America. So it's tough. It's kind of tough to listen to that stuff because they're not shying away from at least what, Eric Killmonger's views of reality are. And his whole plan, which again hits kind of close to home, is that he wants to specifically arm African Americans and other African immigrants all over the world with Wakandan vibranium technology so that they can fight back and take revenge against their oppressors, mostly white people. And that's where it gets kind of like, ooh, like there's some tension even in the audience as this stuff is coming up, because what the bad guy's plan is to start a revolution, an African American and African in general revolution against their white oppressors. And it's tough. It's tough to watch a movie that gets so specific with its politics, but I think it was important that they acknowledge that that's not the right way to handle this situation, and that in the end, what really saved it and brought it back to kind of safer ground is when T'Challa finally agrees that his dad made the wrong move when he left some kid alone in Oakland without a father. And T'Challa's arc by the end of the movie is that he's decided to stop hiding Wakanda's resources from the world and actually help, to reach out, to be a part of the world, and to make a difference. And he gives this great speech, which is the mid-credit scene. And usually the mid-credits scene is a little joke or a teaser for the next movie. And this almost, I feel, should have been the actual end of the movie and not just a mid-credit scene. But he gives a speech to announce Wakanda's aid to the world. And he says something to the effect of, during times like these, fools build barriers while the wise build bridges. And I thought that was an important note to end on, that it's not about being militaristic. It's not about a revolution. It's not about fighting back against those who have done you wrong. It's about building bridges instead of barriers. It's about realizing that we have more in common than we have separating us. And that was the thing that really saved it and brought it home. Now, I think a lot of the best scenes in this movie were with Killmonger. And there were two opportunities I saw to bring it to a 5 out of 5. And it didn't quite take advantage of it. The first opportunity was when Killmonger takes the throne and he gets to go through this ceremony where he goes to the ancestral plane and he gets to meet his father again. And when he meets his father, he goes into the ancestral plane as an adult, as he is now, and then he changes back into a little kid, the age that he was when his father died, and then changes back to an adult for the end of the conversation. I would have really loved to see him stay the age that he is throughout that entire conversation, because he's now a full-grown man talking to his father, who they can now relate to each other because his father never got to see him as an adult. And I would have liked an even more emotional reunion there, because the whole thing is that Killmonger's father says, "What, you have no tears for your old man?" And Killmonger says, everybody dies, and he does shed one single tear. But if they really wanted to make this villain complex, and it would seem cheesy and over the top if it was a good guy doing this, but it would add a lot of texture for the villain if he just full on hugged his dad and just broke down crying because he missed his dad so much. That would have been a great layer for the villain to give him a lot more depth and texture and make you question whether or not he's actually the bad guy. The second opportunity came at the end of the movie, where Killmonger has actually been stabbed by Black Panther, and he's gonna die. They've come to the point where he's lost. He knows he's lost, and he's gonna die. And he says that his father used to tell him about this place, Wakanda. And he says something like, "Whoever thought a kid from Oakland could step into a fairy tale," or something like that. And it's like his he brings out his low self-esteem there, where he's like, it's almost back to that line from Captain America, "I'm just a kid from Brooklyn." And it really kind of hits home again, where he's saying, "I'm just some kid from Oakland. Whoever thought I'd get to see this, world from fairy tales." And they go out and actually watch the sunset together as he's dying. And that's a great bonding moment between T'Challa and Eric, where they are cousins, they are family. And Eric was kind of cast out and left behind, and he actually is able to die while watching a Wakandan sunset. And that was close. That was, almost got me to a 5 out of 5. And I almost feel like, again, they needed to dig a little bit deeper. That was a great line of dialogue to say, it's like, whoever thought that a kid from Oakland would ever get to step into a fairy tale like this? And if he had just gone just a little bit further, just a little bit deeper, and said just a little bit more about what that was like, the contrast between how he grew up and this world that he always grew up hearing about that he never got to see, that might have been enough to push it over to a 5 out of 5 for me. But they didn't quite take advantage of those two key moments for the villain that would have, in my eyes, put it over the top and made it an almost perfect movie. So, because it didn't quite have that X factor, because it didn't quite push it over the edge for me, I got to give it a 4 out of 5. But there's a lot of good stuff in this movie. It's a lot of good, important, thematic stuff in it. It can get a little on the nose at times. It can get a little bit heavy-handed at times, especially since Eric Killmonger's essential plan is basically racial warfare. So, again, it's tough to get through if you consider the implications in real life, but I think it was a brave move on their part not to shy away from those topics and not to... and credit to Marvel for letting them put that kind of edgy stuff in there. Because I would almost imagine studio notes coming back saying, "Hey, can you dial this back a little bit? You might scare people away." And they didn't. To their credit, they let it stay in the movie. And I think the movie is ultimately better for it. So what did you think of this movie? Did you like it? Hate it? I really am not interested in starting a political debate down in the comment section below. Let's keep this civil. Let's keep it focused on the movie itself, huh? All right? Because I know that once we get started on a political rant, it's never going to stop. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. This is Good Screenwriting, and I'm Trevor Meyer. See you next time.